Let's get one thing straight. Your energy is sacred. The people you allow into your life, they either fuel your fire or drain it. And far too many of us are wasting time justifying red flags, explaining away bad behavior, and keeping people around out of guilt or habit. No, this isn't about drama. It's not about revenge. It's about self-respect. When someone shows you who they are, really shows you, you don't owe them a second chance to hurt you again. You owe yourself peace. So today, we're going to talk about the signs, the subtle ones, the obvious ones, the ones you've been ignoring. And when you recognize them, you won't argue, you won't fight. You'll do the most powerful thing you can, silently cut them off. When someone's communication with you is inconsistent, it's more than just an inconvenience. It's a sign that something is off. We often brush it aside, telling ourselves they're just busy, they're going through something, or maybe we're overthinking it. But deep down, you know, you feel the shift. The excitement in their texts disappears. The quick replies turn into silence. The way they used to check in becomes a distant memory. And here's the truth most people don't want to admit. Consistency is a form of respect. When someone values you, you don't have to guess how they feel about you. You don't have to keep checking your phone, wondering if you said something wrong. You don't feel anxious after every interaction. People who truly care show up, and they show up regularly. Inconsistent communication creates an emotional roller coaster. One day they're all in, sweet, thoughtful, present. The next day, they vanish. They don't reply. Or worse, they hit you back with dry, empty responses that make you feel like you're bothering them. This back and forth messes with your head. You start questioning yourself. Am I being too clingy? Should I wait for them to text first? And maybe I'm just expecting too much? But none of that is the real issue. The issue is that they are giving you just enough to keep you hanging on, but never enough to feel secure. It's emotional breadcrumbing, and it's a tactic, whether they're conscious of it or not. They want the benefits of your presence without the responsibility of being consistent. People who communicate inconsistently are often those who don't want to be held accountable. They like the idea of you. They like what you bring to the table, but they don't want to commit. They don't want to give you clarity, and they definitely don't want to be called out. So they keep it vague. They keep it loose. They keep it confusing. Why? Because confusion keeps you stuck. When you're confused, you're constantly analyzing, wondering, hoping. You start settling for crumbs when you deserve the whole meal. You have to ask yourself, if someone can't even maintain basic communication, how are they going to show up for you when life gets real? If they disappear when things are calm, how will they act when things get hard? If you're already feeling the emotional drain just from the inconsistency of a text message, imagine what being emotionally vulnerable with them would feel like. It's exhausting. And over time, it chips away at your self-esteem. You start to equate your worth with their attention, not realizing that their inconsistency says everything about them and nothing about you. Cutting someone off for inconsistent communication doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. You're setting a standard. If you want access to me, show up. If you want to stay in my life, be present. Or if you can't even do the bare minimum, you don't get the privilege of being in my energy. Because that's what it is, a privilege. Your time, your energy, your attention, they're valuable. And people who treat them like an option don't deserve a permanent seat in your life. It's not about needing someone to text you 24/7. It's not about needing constant validation. It's about emotional safety. Consistency builds trust. It tells your nervous system, you're safe here. You're not being played. You're not being led on. And when someone takes that away with their silence or unpredictability, they're sending a loud message, you're not a priority. That's your cue. You don't have to explain, argue, or beg for more. You just take the hint, protect your peace, and move on silently. Because when someone really wants you in their life, they don't confuse you. They don't make you guess. They don't dip in and out depending on their mood. They communicate clearly, consistently, and with intention. And until you experience that kind of clarity, you'll keep mistaking inconsistency for mystery. But mystery fades. What stays is emotional stability. And that only comes from someone who respects your time, your presence, and your work. So if you're dealing with someone who talks to you when it's convenient, who ghosts and reappears like clockwork, or who leaves you wondering where you stand every single day, cut them off silently. Not because you're angry, but because you're done. Done accepting less than what you give. Done waiting for someone to finally show up. Done making excuses for what is clearly a choice. People who want to stay consistent in your life will make it known. The rest, let them go. When someone consistently disregards your boundaries, it's a deep, unsettling signal that they do not truly respect you. Boundaries aren't walls. They're guidelines for how you expect to be treated. The lines that protect your mental, emotional, and sometimes even physical well-being. And when someone crosses those lines repeatedly, despite being told where they are, it's not just forgetfulness. It's a choice to value their own comfort, their own desires above your needs. It's not a misunderstanding, it's a violation. And no matter how charming, fun, or close someone may seem, if they can't respect your boundaries, they should not have access to your life. At first, the boundary crossing can seem small. Maybe you've said you need time to yourself, but they keep pushing, calling, showing up, demanding more. Maybe you've asked them not to bring up a painful topic, but they keep joking about it like it's no big deal. Maybe you've made it clear that certain behaviors, raising their voice, prying into personal matters, touching your stuff, make you uncomfortable. And instead of honoring that, they brush it off. They call you too sensitive. They say you're making it a big deal. That right there is the red flag when someone not only crosses your boundary, but then makes you feel guilty for setting it in the first place. That's emotional manipulation hiding under the mask of casualness or care. Respecting boundaries requires maturity. It means listening when someone says no and not taking it as a challenge. It means understanding that just because you're comfortable with something doesn't mean someone else has to be. It's about emotional intelligence, empathy, and control. And people who ignore boundaries often lack one or all of those. They may not even see what they're doing is wrong because in their mind, your discomfort isn't a priority. What they want is. So they test your limits. They push. They see how far they can go. And if you give in once, that becomes the new normal. You say yes when you meant no, and suddenly your boundary vanishes in their eyes. Or the more you bend, the more they take. And slowly, without even realizing it, you begin to shrink inside your own life. And here's where it gets dangerous. When you start convincing yourself that the boundary isn't that important, you tell yourself you're overreacting, that maybe they didn't mean it, that they're trying, but you feel it. That tightness in your chest, or that slight dread when you see their name pop up, that voice in your head that says, and I hope they don't bring that up again today. That's your intuition speaking. That's your body telling you that your space is being invaded, your emotional needs are being ignored, and your self-respect is slowly eroding. The people who belong in your life are the ones who honor your limits, even when they don't understand them. They don't make you explain 10 times. They don't guilt trip you. They don't force you into uncomfortable situations for their own gain. They respect your no as much as they enjoy your ease. That's how real, healthy connection works. It's mutual. It's rooted in care, not control. But when someone constantly crosses your boundaries, especially after you've made them clear, it's not love, it's not friendship, it's not loyalty. It's a dynamic built on power where your voice gets smaller every time they ignore it. And eventually you start blaming yourself for even needing boundaries in the first place. That's why it's critical to recognize this behavior for what it is, a massive waving red flag. You don't need to argue. You don't need to convince them of why your boundary matters. You don't need to give them another chance to do better when they've already shown you what they'll do. If someone can't handle the basic respect of treating you the way you asked to be treated, you don't owe them anything. Not a conversation, not a warning, just distance. Silent, firm, unapologetic distance. Protecting your boundaries is not rude, it's not selfish, it's self-love in action. The people who get offended by your boundaries are usually the ones who benefited from you not having any. So cut them off, silently, because the ones who respect you will never need to be reminded twice. One of the most draining dynamics in any relationship is when it becomes one-sided. You find yourself giving and giving, but receiving less and less in return. This imbalance doesn't always appear overnight. It starts small, with you doing little things here and there, making time for them, offering help, showing up when they need you. At first, it feels natural. You care about them, and naturally, you want to contribute. But as time goes on, the imbalance becomes more noticeable. You start realizing that you're the one doing all the work, making the effort, sending the texts, initiating the conversations, reaching out when they're silent. And yet, they don't reciprocate. It's as though your presence in their life is an afterthought. You're the one who bends over backward, and they're the one who barely notices. The emotional drain is profound, and it takes a toll on your self-worth. This kind of relationship makes you feel like you're constantly chasing approval or affection. You're always the one trying to make plans, the one trying to keep the bond alive, the one worrying about their feelings. You start asking yourself, am I doing something wrong Why am I the only one putting in effort? And when you don't get the same level of investment, it feels like you're invisible, like you're not important enough to make a real effort for. Is a huge red flag. When you notice that you're more concerned about keeping the relationship going than the other person is, it's a clear sign that something isn't right. You're giving without receiving, and slowly you start to feel less like a partner or a friend and more like an obligation. The one-sided nature of this dynamic doesn't just affect the relationship, it affects you. It makes you question your value, your worth, and whether you deserve better. At its core, a relationship, whether romantic or platonic, should be a partnership. It should be reciprocal. Each person should feel seen, heard, and valued. You should be able to lean on each other equally, offer support in times of need, and share in the joys and burdens of life. But when you're the only one making the effort, the relationship becomes more transactional. It's as though you're giving to receive something in return, but instead of getting the care, attention, or respect you're giving, you're left empty-handed. This is the breeding ground for resentment. You start to feel angry, not at them directly, but at the unfairness of it all. You feel like you're always the one who makes it work, always the one who compromises, and never the one who gets to simply be in the relationship without doing all the emotional heavy lifting. People who are genuinely invested in you will show it through their actions, not just their words. If you're the one who always has to remind them about important things in your life, if you're the one who always follows up on plans, if you're the one who keeps things moving, it's exhausting. And over time, it chips away at your sense of self-worth. You start believing that maybe you're not worth the effort. You start telling yourself that maybe they're just busy, or maybe you're being too demanding, or maybe you just need to try harder. But here's the truth. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for the basics. You're asking for care, consistency, and effort. You're asking for a relationship that feels mutual and balanced, not one where you're constantly giving without getting anything in return. If this sounds familiar, it's time to recognize it for what it is: emotional labor. One-sided relationships place the burden of maintaining the connection solely on one person. And the longer you stay in this dynamic, the more you sacrifice your own peace, happiness, and self-respect. You may even start resenting the person for not reciprocating, and that resentment can breed negativity. It can make you feel unappreciated, and in some cases, you may start to resent yourself for letting things go on this way. The energy you invest into someone who is emotionally unavailable or disinterested is energy that could be spent elsewhere, on people who actually care about you, on your own growth, or on passions and pursuits that nurture you. When you realize that the relationship is one-sided, it's time to take a step back. You don't need to confront them or make a scene. Instead, simply stop investing the same way you were before. Let them come to you. If they're interested in keeping the relationship going, they will recognize the shift and make an effort themselves. If not, it's a clear signal that the relationship isn't worth your time and energy. Letting go of one-sided relationships isn't about cutting someone off out of anger. It's about protecting your own emotional health and acknowledging that you deserve to be in relationships where the effort is mutual, where your time and love are valued, and where you can thrive without constantly feeling drained. Passive-aggressive behavior is one of the most toxic and subtle forms of manipulation in any relationship. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It's the kind of behavior that leaves you confused, questioning your own perception of reality. It's not the loud outbursts, the direct insults, or the obvious confrontations you have to worry about. It's the more insidious, indirect actions that create emotional turmoil. The sarcastic comments disguised as jokes, the subtle digs, the silent treatment, the promises made but never kept. These are the hallmarks of passive-aggressive behavior. And when you're on the receiving end of it, it can feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, never knowing what's really going on beneath the surface. At its core, passive aggression is an avoidance tactic. The person engaging in this behavior is unwilling or unable to express their true feelings directly, so they resort to indirect means of communication. They might be angry, frustrated, or hurt, but instead of confronting the issue head-on, they use underhanded methods to express their discontent. This could come in the form of backhanded compliments, sarcastic remarks, or even procrastination. Things that seem like minor annoyances but carry a much deeper, unspoken message. Over time, these behaviors wear you down. You start second-guessing yourself, trying to decipher what they really mean. Is it a joke? Is it a criticism? Are they mad at you? Or are you overreacting? This confusion is exactly what they want. It leaves you stuck in a loop, Unsure of how to address the issue or even if there's an issue at all? One of the most dangerous aspects of passive-aggressive behavior is that it's hard to call out. If you confront the person directly about their actions, they can always deny it or play the victim, claiming you're being too sensitive. It's a manipulation tactic that allows them to avoid responsibility for their behavior while still making you feel bad. They might act like they're doing you a favor, all while undermining your sense of self-worth and making you feel guilty for something you didn't even do. This creates a dynamic where you're constantly left questioning whether it's you who is the problem, rather than recognizing that their behavior is the real issue. The impact of passive-aggressive behavior can be subtle, but it's incredibly harmful in the long term. Over time, it erodes trust. When you can't rely on someone to be direct with you, you start to question their intentions. You wonder if they're hiding something, manipulating you, or simply not being honest. This creates an atmosphere of uncertainty and anxiety where you're never really sure where you stand. And the longer this goes on, the more it affects your mental and emotional health. You start to internalize the confusion, making excuses for their behavior, downplaying your own feelings, and accepting the constant tension as normal. But it's not normal, it's toxic. And no matter how subtle it seems, passive-aggressive behavior is a form of emotional abuse. Another reason why passive aggression is so harmful is because it keeps you in a perpetual state of emotional limbo. Instead of dealing with issues directly, the person is pushing you to make the first move, to confront the problem, to fix things on their terms. It's a power play. They hold the emotional control without ever having to take responsibility for their actions. This leaves you feeling like you're always the one who has to navigate the storm. You might find yourself apologizing for things you didn't even do, trying to smooth over situations that never had a chance to be resolved in the first place. The real danger here is that this kind of behavior often gets overlooked, especially in relationships where conflict is avoided at all costs. It's easy to dismiss passive-aggressive behavior as something small or insignificant, but if it becomes a pattern, it starts to wear away at the foundation of the relationship. You begin to doubt your own emotions, question your reactions, and ultimately lose trust in your own instincts. And all of this creates an environment where true, honest communication is impossible. If you can't speak openly and directly, you can't build a genuine connection. Without that foundation of trust and transparency, the relationship is built on shaky ground. In dealing with passive-aggressive behavior, the most important thing is to recognize it for what it is. It's not just a harmless quirk or a sign of someone being shy or awkward. It's a manipulative tactic that undermines your emotional well-being. And when you recognize this behavior, it's crucial to address it head-on. This might mean setting clear boundaries, calling out the behavior when it happens, or in some cases, walking away from the relationship entirely. You deserve to be treated with respect, and no amount of passive-aggressive games should make you second-guess that. Passive-aggressive behavior reveals more about the person who's engaging in it than it does about you. It's a sign of their inability or unwillingness to communicate honestly. And that's not your problem to fix. The moment you see it, cut it off. Silence speaks louder than any sarcastic comment, and it's your key to taking back control over your own emotional space. There's something deeply unsettling about being in a relationship where you feel like you're the one always giving energy and never receiving it back. This is particularly true when it comes to friendships, romantic relationships, or even work environments where you're constantly drained by people who seem to take more from you than they ever offer. You start feeling emotionally exhausted, as though you've given every ounce of yourself to someone, only to find that they're not there to give you anything in return. They don't offer support when you need it. They don't check in on your well-being. And in many cases, they barely acknowledge your presence unless they need something from you. The imbalance of energy, where you're always the one putting in effort, can be one of the most depleting experiences of all. Energy drainers don't just physically exhaust you. They mentally and emotionally wear you out. When you're always the one listening to their problems, always the one offering solutions, or always the one propping them up during tough times, you start to feel like a caretaker rather than a partner, friend, or colleague. It's not a healthy dynamic. You give advice, you lend your shoulder to cry on, you show up for them time and time again, and yet when it's your turn to lean on them, they're nowhere to be found. It's like you're caught in a cycle where you're expected to be selfless, but there's no room for your own needs to be met. You start asking yourself, why do I keep doing this? Why does it feel like I'm the only one invested in this relationship? This emotional imbalance often goes unnoticed for a while, simply because we tend to give with the hope that others will eventually reciprocate. We make excuses for them and say they've been really busy. And maybe they're going through something, or no, they care. They just don't know how to show it. But after a while, the signs become clear and it becomes harder to ignore the pattern. The issue isn't just that they don't show up when you need them. It's that they don't even realize there's a problem. They're so focused on their own needs, their own concerns, that they fail to see how their behavior impacts you. And when they do notice, they may offer a half-hearted apology, but the pattern never really changes. The cycle repeats, and you're left feeling drained and unappreciated. The worst part about being constantly drained is that you begin to feel like you're invisible. Your own feelings, struggles, and needs get sidelined while you're expected to cater to theirs. You start to feel like you're in a one-sided relationship where the other person's issues take precedence over yours. And after a while, you may even start to feel guilty for wanting something in return. Am I asking too much? Is it selfish of me to want them to care as much as I care? This guilt is a dangerous thing. It's a tactic that emotional drainers use, often unconsciously, to keep you in the cycle of giving without receiving. They pull you in, and before you know it, you're questioning your own worth, your own needs, and your own right to be supported. When you're giving energy to someone who doesn't return it, you're not just emotionally drained, you're also left feeling disillusioned. You begin to question what the relationship is really about. Is it about mutual respect? Is it about care and consideration? Or is it simply about fulfilling one person's needs at the cost of the other's well-being? This type of dynamic not only damages your self-esteem, but also prevents you from forming healthy, balanced connections with others. You start accepting less than you deserve, telling yourself that this is just what relationships are like, but it isn't. Healthy relationships, whether personal or professional, are built on mutual support and understanding. There should be an exchange of energy. You lift each other up. You support each other's dreams. You show up when it counts. If you find yourself constantly drained by someone, it's time to ask yourself a hard question: why am I allowing this? The answer often lies in a deeper need for validation or fear of abandonment. You may be so invested in making the relationship work that you ignore the clear signs of imbalance, but in doing so, you're allowing someone to take advantage of your time, your energy, and your kindness. And the sad truth is that people who are habitual energy drainers rarely change unless they recognize their behavior and choose to adjust. Until then, you will continue to be the one making all the sacrifices while they continue to take. Cutting ties with someone who drains your energy isn't about being heartless. It's about preserving your own well-being. You have to protect your peace, your emotional health, and your ability to thrive. When someone continually takes and never gives, they're not showing love, respect, or appreciation. They're showing selfishness. And the moment you start valuing your own needs as much as you value theirs is the moment you begin to regain control over your life. It's okay to walk away from relationships where your energy isn't being reciprocated. Because by doing so, you're creating space for people who will uplift you, support you, and bring balance into your life. It's time to stop pouring from an empty cup. It's time to fill your cup with people who will replenish you, not deplete. There is a stark difference between people who genuinely support you and those who only act interested in your life when it benefits them. It's easy to mistake casual acquaintances or even people you consider close for those who truly have your best interests at heart, especially when they're quick to celebrate your successes, but slow to offer support when things get tough. The people who are there for you only when you're doing well, who stand by you only when it's convenient for them, are the ones who are more concerned with what they can gain from your success than with your well-being. These are the relationships where love, friendship, or camaraderie is transactional rather than unconditional. You'll notice this pattern over time, especially when you hit a rough patch or face adversity. In moments of crisis, support is not just about offering a helping hand, but about being present emotionally and mentally. It's about showing up when you're down, offering comfort without expecting anything in return, and being a steady presence during the most trying times. But when you're surrounded by people who are only interested in you when you're at your best, you quickly realize that their affection or interest has strings attached. They want to be seen with you when things are looking up, when you're accomplishing great things, when your life is a highlight reel. They want to bask in the glow of your success because it somehow reflects positively on them. But when things take a turn, when you're struggling or facing challenges, they seem to disappear. They're not there for you. They're not checking in, offering comfort, or being the support system they should be. Instead, they vanish into thin air, leaving you feeling more alone than ever. This behavior is not just selfish, It's opportunistic. These people aren't interested in a relationship based on mutual care and respect. They're invested in what you can provide them in terms of status, connection, or image. They're the kind of people who gravitate toward you when you're winning, but fade into the background when you're losing. They want to enjoy the perks of your success without ever having to invest the same energy into supporting you when you need it most. And this, at its core, is what makes them untrustworthy. Relationships, at their healthiest, are not one-sided. They are a shared space where both individuals contribute, support, and care for one another. When that balance is tipped, and someone only shows up when things are easy or when there's something to gain, they reveal their true intentions. The problem with these kinds of relationships is that they often leave you questioning your worth. You start to wonder whether people only care about you when you're doing well, whether they value you for who you truly are, or only for what you can provide them in moments of success. Over time, you might internalize these feelings, thinking that your worth is tied to what you can offer or achieve. This is a dangerous mindset because it shifts your self-worth from being intrinsic, rooted in your character and who you are, to being extrinsic, tied to external factors and achievements. This is when you realize that the people who were supposed to have your back, who you thought were genuinely rooting for you, were only interested in your wins and not your true self. And that realization hurts. What's even more damaging is the emotional toll this kind of relationship takes on you. When you go through hardships and don't receive the support you need, it can leave you feeling abandoned and invalidated. It can lead to feelings of loneliness, even when you're surrounded by people who seem to care only when it benefits them. This can exacerbate feelings of isolation, as you realize that the network of support you thought you had is actually far more superficial than you anticipated. You start questioning who is actually there for you and who is simply there to ride the coattails of your success. Ultimately, this is about setting a standard for what you allow in your life. You deserve relationships where support isn't conditional. You deserve people who are there for you when you're at your lowest, not just your highest. Those who truly care for you will show up even when it's inconvenient, even when there's nothing to gain. They won't only celebrate your achievements, they'll help you pick up the pieces when things fall apart. These are the people who are genuinely invested in your well-being, and these are the people you want to keep close. Recognizing this type of behavior in others is difficult, especially when the people involved have been a part of your life for a long time. But once you start to see the pattern, it's crucial to take action. It's important to protect your energy and your mental health by distancing yourself from people who only care about you for their own benefit. The emotional toll of constantly being surrounded by people who aren't really there for you can be overwhelming. You don't need to keep proving your worth to others who aren't genuinely supportive. It's time to surround yourself with people who care about you for who you are, not just for what you can do for them. Real love and support are given freely, without strings attached. And that's the kind of relationship you deserve. In conclusion, the relationships that truly nourish us are built on mutual respect, trust, and genuine care. It's essential to recognize when someone's behavior is draining, one-sided, or only beneficial to them. Life is too short to keep investing in relationships where you're not valued or supported in return. We all deserve to be surrounded by people who lift us up, who are there for us not just when it's easy, but especially when it's difficult. If you find yourself constantly giving more than you're receiving, it's time to take a step back. Trust yourself enough to walk away from situations that leave you feeling drained, undervalued, or unsupported. The moment you start to prioritize your own well-being, set clear boundaries, and remove toxic influences from your life, you open the door to healthier, more fulfilling relationships that will help you thrive. Remember, you deserve love, respect, and support, not only when you're winning, but also when you're struggling. Let go of what no longer serves you and make space for those who will truly stand by your side, no matter what.